Real quick, before we get started, I'd like to thank you for your constant support. It's been amazing. If you have a story to tell, please reach out via email at contact@campfirecultpod.com or leave me a voicemail at 720-297-8608. If neither of those options work for you, you can always record a voice memo and send it to me via email. Either way, I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Welcome, dear listener, to the Campfire Cult Podcast. From a camper van deep in the haunted woods, I bring you first-hand accounts of chilling encounters with the paranormal. Step into the night and take a peek into the realm where reality and the supernatural collide. My name is Jazz, and I'll be your host. Welcome back, campers, for another episode of the Campfire Cult Podcast. It must be because it's the summer, but it seems like every episode I do revolves around camping these days. This one is no exception. Today's stories will be taking place deep in the forest in a cabin in the woods. I'll be sharing another personal story with you, as well as a couple of others that fall into the quote-unquote creepy cabin in the woods category. For our first story, I'll be making it a little bit personal and taking you to my family's cabin in South Lake Tahoe, California. It's early summer 2002 when I went on a long weekend trip with my aunt, uncle, 2 cousins, and a foreign exchange student. The Tahoe house, as we called it, is owned by my godparents and has been enjoyed for years by anyone in our family circle looking to escape the city for the weekend. It was tradition, or rather habit, I guess. We'd always start off the day at a little greasy spoon that was called Chris's Cafe at the time, but I believe it's now called the Getaway Cafe on Highway 89 in Myers, California, just south of South Lake Tahoe. It had excellent mountain breakfasts and unlimited coffee to get you ready for any adventure you were seeking that day. On this particular day, we wanted to go on one of our favorite hikes in the area. Not sure of the actual name of the trail, but it goes from Emerald Bay to Eagle Lake, a beautiful 3-mile out and back that I've done, countless times. We were all excited to show our foreign exchange student member of our family the crystal clear waters of not only Lake Tahoe, but also all of the alpine lakes in the area, and Eagle Lake being one of our favorites along this hike. After a few hours of hiking and enjoying the lake, we were all ready to head back to the cabin for a bite to eat. My uncle, always down for an adventure, wanted to give our new friend an exciting memory to go home with, so we decided to go off-trail following the river back to our cars. It was a very fun, yet rugged hike, with a few scary parts where tree roots saved us from falling into the river below. At the time, I was a smoker, and by the time we reached our cabin around 2 p.m., I was exhausted and in dire need of a nap before an evening of board games by the fire. The cabin consists of 3 bedrooms and a loft. The room I usually stay in was lovingly known as the Budweiser room, because at one point, the room was adorned with Budweiser-themed bedding and curtains. I don't really know the origin story of the Budweiser sheets and curtains, but I have a feeling the 70s had something to do with it. Nonetheless, it was my favorite room because it was always stayed cool, even in the dead of summer, unlike the rest of the cabin that lacked air conditioning. It was a simple room with a side table, a small closet, and an old, squeaky queen-size bed with a nice body-sized dent in the middle, perfect for snuggling into at night. When I was finally ready for a nap, I flopped down face first into said dent without bothering to get under the covers. Normally it takes me some time to wind down enough and fall asleep, even when tired, so I was busy replaying the day in my head when I felt something brush across my feet and move to the left side of the bed. I didn't think much of it at first, assuming it was one of the 2 dogs that were staying in the house with us because they typically follow me around, as I, am known to buy love with endless treats. About 30 seconds later, I felt the weight of something lean onto the bed, starting at the foot and slowly moving towards the pillows, eventually settling down next to me, but not touching me. Although I couldn't feel it, there was definitely something there, I dismissed it originally as my cousin Janelle, who was 12 at the time. We never really took naps together, but since we were so close and my cousins felt more like siblings, it didn't seem strange at the time that she'd want to take a nap next to me. While I lay there, still trying to relax, I felt what I thought was Janelle, move to the foot of the bed again, brush across my feet to the right, and slide onto the right side of the bed right next to me. It was a little strange, I have to admit, but I just figured she didn't want to sleep on the other side of the bed. I didn't think about it too much, and didn't want to open my eyes for verification because I didn't want to risk waking up and not being able to take a nap. Again, after a few minutes had passed, I felt the weight of the bed shift again, moving down towards the foot of the bed and lighten up as if Janelle got bored and decided a nap wasn't in her future. After a few more minutes passed, I was definitely drifting off to sleep when I was abruptly awakened by the sensation of two hands lightly gripping my ankles. Thinking Janelle was playing a prank on me, I decided to scare her before she could scare me. I counted to 3 in my head, 1, 2, 3, and jumped out of the bed with a roar, intended to give her a scare. To my surprise, there was no one in the room. I quickly jumped out of bed, checked under it, in the closet, and even pulled back the curtains in a desperate attempt to explain what had just happened. The door of the room was closed, and when I opened it, I found my cousin, aunt, uncle, and the foreign exchange student enjoying themselves by the fire, nowhere near my room. I closed the door, sat on the foot of the bed, and tried to process what had just occurred in the past half hour or so. At dinner that night, I shared the story with everyone, and it turns out I'm not the first person to have a strange experience in that room. Apparently, everyone feels a little bit spooked by it, which explains why no one ever is opposed to me staying in it. It's a little peculiar because, to our knowledge, the cabin wasn't built on a burial site or associated with any deaths at all. Since my family enjoys buying antiques and pillaging estate sales, we figured that it was an antique or something that must have had something attached to it, which now resides in the cabin and makes its home in the Budweiser room. To this day, I still stay in that room, hoping for another encounter, but I haven't been fortunate enough to experience anything since the first incident. Thankfully, it seems like it's only a lonely spirit always seeking to get close to the room's occupant, and nothing more. Oddly, this isn't the first time I've had something happen to me while laying in bed ready for sleep. Often in high school, I'd feel my bed start to shake during this twilight time between being awake and sleeping. It'd wake me up completely, and I'd still be shaking when I'd sit up in bed, only to stop once I got out of it. Very strange. When I was a kid, I'd also hear my name whispered in my ear as I was falling asleep. So often, in fact, that I kind of dreaded going to sleep. Although, I was kind of a strange kid. I was also known to sleep with my neck exposed, hoping that a vampire would come bite me during the night. I don't know. You do weird shit when you're a kid. Let's move on. These next couple of stories were taken from Reddit, and I'll have links to the stories in the show notes. I'm an executive at a prominent business, and my job is pretty stressful, taking up most of my free time. However, I get a couple of weeks vacation each year, during which I prefer to spend time alone. It helps me recharge and get back to the right mindset. In the past, I used to take my vacations in the hills, renting a secluded cabin to enjoy the solitude. Oh man, don't we all? After 2 weeks of this, I would feel refreshed and ready to tackle another year. This is the story of the incident that made me change my preference from remote to urban vacations. A few years ago, I rented a cabin far away from civilization, seeking peace and a chance to connect with wildlife. The cabin was located over an hour-and-a-half drive down the mountains and pretty far from the closest town, without any phone lines or radio. My only means of communication was driving down to town. Although seeing someone in the woods was unusual, there were other cabins in the area, so it was possible. One day, while sitting on the porch reading, I noticed a person in the trees. He seemed like a hiker, and when he saw me looking at him, he waved. I waved back, feeling glad to see another person. He eventually left, and I went back to my book. As time passed, I heard rustling in the woods again. I looked up, saw the same man at the same spot. This time, he didn't respond to my acknowledgement, but stared at me for a long, kind of too long, before leaving. It left me a little unsettled, but I didn't have a reason to worry. Nonetheless, I decided to go inside. Feeling a bit silly, I locked the door. The rest of the day went without any more incidents, and I didn't see or hear anything unusual. However, around 10 p.m., I heard a strange sound in the driveway, reminding me of that man that I had seen earlier. I became nervous and grabbed the flashlight, shined it around the porch and the surroundings. I noticed movement among the bushes, making me a little bit more apprehensive. I quickly went back inside and locked the door. Feeling a little anxious, I decided to calm my nerves with some scotch. I had a few more drinks and then stumbled my way into the room and passed out for the night. A couple of hours later, I woke up and went to the bathroom without turning on the lights. I returned after peeing and went back to sleep. The next morning, I woke up with a headache and noticed two things. First, my front door was unlocked, and second, there was a note attached to it. The note said, "Next time, you might want to keep a light on. You walked right by me when you went to take a pee." At that moment, I ran right out of the house, hopped in my car, and went straight home, never vacationing alone in the woods again. Our next cabin in the woods story is entitled Creepy Encounter. I had a very scary experience happen to me in 2017 that has stuck with me throughout the years, and I'm wondering if you could possibly help me explain what I witnessed in the woods those years ago. I was about 16 at the time, and I'm half indigenous. I was visiting my uncle on my mom's side, the indigenous side, at his cabin located in the woods of northwestern Maine. The cabin was rather small and could only accommodate my uncle and aunt, so I was told to sleep in the camper that was parked out back in the woods. That evening went by as usual. Auntie made dinner, and we laughed and shared stories and eventually turned out for the night. I took a flashlight and started my way back to the camper. About halfway down, I shut off the flashlight and looked up to admire the night sky. It was at this point I noticed how quiet the forest had become. It was silent. There were no birds or sound of crickets or rustling leaves, just pure silence. I suddenly got the intense feeling of dread deep inside my gut, and the hair on the back of my neck stood up. The voice in my head told me to bolt for the camper as fast as I could. For some reason, my instincts told me I didn't belong there, and something was watching me. When I made it to the camper, I slammed the door shut and double-locked it, closing the windows and blinds. I swear I could hear my heart pounding into my ears, and I laughed at myself for getting so worked up over probably nothing. The entire night, I was restless. I couldn't help but hear footsteps and movement all around the camper. I told myself I was just curious animals and grazing deer, but I seemed to be haunted by something I couldn't see. Unfortunately, this was not the final experience of the weekend. By morning, all seemed normal. I thought about mentioning what happened to my grandfather over breakfast, but I was worried that he would brush me off as being overdramatic or being too used to the city life. I ended up letting the odd night slide out of my mind as I enjoyed the day with my family and their big German Shepherd, Frank. To calm my nerves a little, I took Frank to the camper for the night. The walk back was fine until we got to the tree line. I'm not sure if it was because I was feeling nervous, but Frank seemed to be on edge too, with his ears perked and his head on a swivel. The whole night, he wouldn't leave my side. I felt safer with the dog in there, however. When I woke up in the middle of the night, Frank was staring at the wall of the trailer with his hackles raised and the hair on his back standing on end. When the morning hit, I packed my bags to leave and brought Frank out of the trailer and led him through the small field between the cabin and the thick woods. I was kicking his ball for him to chase on the way back. We continued this game until I kicked the ball just a little bit too hard and it went past the edge of the woods. Frank raced after it in a full sprint and then suddenly came to a dead stop. He was standing stiff, fur on end, ears pricked back, and unmoving. I called for him to come, which he always responds to, but he didn't even acknowledge me. I began to walk down to where he was, still calling his name. Getting a little worried at this point, I grabbed him by the collar, but still there was no response, as he wouldn't stop staring directly into the woods. The forest was silent, but moments later, the silence was broken by an echo of my voice yelling back at me. However, this echo was delayed and a little bit distorted. It sounded like me, but also not like me. I froze and looked into the dark woods, holding my breath only for another scream to come from the woods in my voice. I immediately turned and booked back to the cabin. I ran to my auntie crying, telling her that there was something in the woods. She comforted me and told me that there was nothing to be worried about, but I noticed that she couldn't take her eyes off the wood line in the backyard. I ended up leaving that afternoon, and honestly, I haven't been back since. I think we've all felt that feeling of being watched in the woods that quickened our pace and sent us sprinting for our cars. This last story reminds me of what's referred to as a skinwalker. Often being seen on Native American land or close to it, the skinwalker legend is deeply ingrained in Native American folklore, particularly among tribes such as the Navajo and Hopi in the southwestern United States. A skinwalker is believed to possess the ability to manipulate or mimic human voices, leading to reports of strange and unexplained sounds in the wilderness. They are most active at night and tend to target travelers, campers, and individuals who are alone in remote areas. This last quick bonus story doesn't have anything to do with the cabin in the woods, but rather a tale of the skinwalker. It was the summer of 2018. Late at night, me and my friend Matthew had gone down to the lake to swim. Now, I'm a rather large guy for my age, and Matthew, though he's only 16, is about 6 feet tall. Not really the pair you'd want to intimidate on your own. We were swimming for about an hour before I had to use the bathroom, so I took my flashlight and headed towards the community bathrooms. After doing my business, I began to head back, but soon saw something on the path. I assumed it was Matthew, so I called out to him, "Hey Matt, over here man." I walked closer, but stopped dead in my tracks when I heard an almost identical voice to mine say, "Hey Matt, over here man." It sounded like whatever this thing was on the path was trying its best to mimic me. I shined my light in its direction, but what I saw was not my friend, nor another person. It was a large, bone-thin figure with long arms and an oddly animalistic, misshapen head. It looked away, and I heard something again say, "Hey Matt, over here man." I stood there petrified while I suddenly heard something behind me. It was the actual Matt. When I quickly turned around again back towards the creature, I saw it bolt into the woods and disappear. It traveled the distance of about 60 feet in only a couple of seconds. I soon felt a hand on my shoulder and turned to see Matt there, wondering why I was so shaken. He told me that he heard me call his name 3 times, but I looked at him and admitted that I only said his name once. I still go to the lake with Matthew every so often, but these days I always carry something for protection, and we definitely go during the day. There are few things creepier than being alone in the woods and hearing a voice that shouldn't be there. Even creepier yet, it's a voice that sounds just like your own. "Hey Matt, over here man." Until next time, dear listeners, I'll be leaving you in the dark where whispers linger and shadows dance. Stay wary and sleep well, but beware the whispers in the night. If you have a story to tell, you can reach us via email at contact@campfirecultpod.com or leave us a voicemail message at 720-297-8608. Find us all over the place socially at Campfire Cult Pod and online at campfirecultpod.com. And finally, if you don't mind, please rate and review wherever possible.